I'm Deanna Conheeney, the president of this organization. We have an impressive crowd this evening and also here and via Zoom. For your information, we'll be taking a break over the holidays from our lectures, and we'll restart in February with a totally Zoom lecture because of the weather. We'll do it all Zoom and everybody can enjoy it in the comfort of their home. And then another one in March, closing out the season. And no dates have yet been set. I can tell you that the March lecture, though, will feature our own Steve Marino with a presentation on St. Mary's Cemetery. I hope you were able, some of you were able to enjoy, I see some people were able to enjoy our fundraiser, FUN, that we had last week with Cahill Dunn. It really was a lot of fun, and so he was so entertaining. And also for your information, our Christmas open house has been scheduled for December 9th from noon to 4:30 at the Interpretive Center. Please drop by for some holiday cheer. From 3:30 to 4:30, the AOH Men Singers will perform. And the open house, just for information, coincides with the Christmas Mass, which is at 5 o'clock at Hibernian Hall. So check this out on our website for more details. The Interpretive Center, as you probably know, is now closed for the season. It'll reopen on a limited basis in March, in celebration of our Irish Heritage Month. I also want to mention that we have ornaments, I don't know if you noticed, for sale in the back. There are our symbol of the museum, so an ornament for either the Christmas tree or for any other thing you want to decorate for the holidays. I also want to recognize the board members that are here. We still have many of them here, and I hope you're getting to know them. Can you stand again so people know who you are? We have Dan back, and Jim, Peg, John, Jack, Larry. I don't know if I got everybody. Ann over there too, and Dan Titus. So, but please speak with them if you have any input you want to give to the museum. Now to the main event. First off, I want to thank Valerie and Dana Gelb for their kind donation and celebrating and sponsoring this lecture. Our speaker this evening, thank you. Our speaker this evening, she's returning for her second lecture, is Maureen Brady. As you read her bio on the flyer, you understand that Ms. Brady is a very accomplished scholar, recognized with awards for leadership and academics in the field of Irish American culture. She studied and received degrees from New York University and Trinity College Dublin, and is associated with Rutgers University. Maureen's presentation will delve into how Ireland has become a world-class travel destination, welcoming millions of Americans each year. She'll also explore the sister city relationship between Newport and Kinsale, a twinning that now is almost 25 years old. So please welcome Maureen Brady as she presents the surprising U.S. roots of Ireland's tourism industry, 50s and 60s. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you, Deanna, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to Valerie and Dana Gelb for sponsoring the talk this evening. It's so important to keep these discussions about heritage that we share alive and in the public forum, so thank you for that. Good evening, everybody in the room. Good evening, everybody who's Zooming in tonight. It's my pleasure to be with you to talk about a subject that may seem surprising, which is the surprising U.S. roots of Irish tourism. And when I talk about tourism, in this case tonight, I'm talking about transatlantic tourism. So now, I'm guessing that some of these pictures are familiar to some of you. The Cliffs of Moher, Clifton and Galway, Donegal. So I'm just wondering, how many of you have ever been to Ireland? What? That looks like 100%. Okay, who's the one person who hasn't been to Ireland in this room? Oh no, 2, okay. Well, you're in good company, because in 2019, Ireland recorded the highest number of US visitors in the country's history, spending a staggering $1.6 billion. Now, given those statistics, I'm going to bet you find it hard to believe that about 70 years ago, a transatlantic tourism industry did not exist in Ireland, and the Irish government had absolutely no interest in developing one. In fact, many in government, including the Irish Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, were actually opposed to it. So the question is, what changed? And the answer to that question lies in the aftermath of World War II. Excuse me. In 1939, Ireland passed an emergency powers order declaring a state of neutrality. The World War II period in Ireland was and is called the emergency. Why did this happen? Ireland was war-weary. They had been through the 1916 Rising, the War of Independence, and the Irish Civil War. And they had only recently achieved independence from Britain in 1922 when the Irish Free State was created. The country was finding its footing, and neutrality was going to insulate the country from war. The problem was it also caused stagnation of the economy. After the war ended, the national treasury was almost zero. There was no money to invest in the country, and the Irish government wanted to find ways to get the economy moving, but specifically in agriculture and manufacturing. But as fate would have it, maybe the luck of the Irish kicked in, because in 1948, in the wake of World War II, an unexpected opportunity presented itself to Ireland. Financial assistance became available by way of the U.S. European Recovery Program, a program crafted by the U.S. Secretary of State, George Marshall. And of course, you know what the name of this program is, right? The Marshall Plan. You haven't heard about that since you were in school, right? Well, tonight we'll revisit a little bit of it. The purpose of the plan was to aid in the economic recovery of nations after World War II, but also to secure U.S. geopolitical influence over Western Europe. Ireland's inclusion in the plan was quite controversial because of its wartime policy of neutrality. However, Ireland was strategic because of its location. Its geographic location allowed the U.S. to provide air and sea access to and from the continent. Also, Ireland was a major supplier of much-needed food exports to Britain and Western Europe. Ireland had pretty much been insulated from the war, so they still had a ready food supply as opposed to the rest of the continent. Ireland was offered the opportunity to participate in the Marshall Plan. However, like all things that seemed too good to be true, there was a stipulation. A core requirement of the Marshall Plan was the implementation of transatlantic tourism. So Ireland's transatlantic tourism originated in the U.S. Marshall Plan. Now, U.S. officials approached Sean Lemass, who at the time was Ireland's Minister of Industry and Commerce, and they explained that if Ireland wanted access to the benefits of the plan, they needed to prioritize tourism development from the United States to Ireland. Tourism would help facilitate improvements in revenue by growing import and export trade, so breaking through the trade barrier. Marshall Plan officials cautioned if Ireland refused to build a tourism industry, the country would receive nothing. Now, Sean Lemass was convinced, and he felt that tourism was a powerful way to combat the economic downturn. And Lemass approached this man, who at the time was Ireland's Taoiseach, Ireland's Prime Minister, Eamon de Valera. Have any of you heard of Eamon de Valera before? No. Well, he was in Irish political government for 50 years, probably the most important politician in Ireland's history. And when Sean Lemass approached de Valera was opposed. He wanted solely to invest in agriculture and manufacturing, but also he was focused on protecting the purity of the Irish people against outsiders, especially Americans, those progressive Americans. Dev wanted the world to see Ireland as a pious Roman Catholic nation. In fact, in the very early days of the Irish Free State, laws were passed legislating morality. Those included censorship, book banning, restriction of women's rights. Women could not serve on juries, they could not hold a job after they were married, and, oh, I know this is going to surprise you, limitation of pub hours, and so much more. But the idea behind all these laws was to protect the purity of the Irish people. So tourism to De Valera was fearful because you were going to bring these people with different points of view into the country. De Valera was concerned that worldly Americans could taint the Irish people who were conservative, who were religious, and insulated from the outside world. Tourism simply was not on the radar of the Irish government or of the Irish Taoiseach. But inevitably, Irish officials were persuaded that transatlantic tourism was a way forward out of the economic malaise of the country. And of course, you know the form that persuasion took: money. Through the Marshall Plan, the US offered Ireland multi-millions of dollars in grants and over $150 million in low-interest loans. This was going to be quite a boom to the country. And so Ireland did accept the Marshall Plan offer, and they did accept the stipulation to begin a tourism industry. But the challenge for them was where to start. They weren't sure, with a nation as expansive as America, with such a large population, at the time about 150 million. So they asked the Marshall Plan if they could connect them with some American travel experts so they could get their advice in how to start building the industry. And the first person they met with and they engaged with was Robert Christenberry. In 1950, the Irish government retained Robert Christenberry, who was the president of the Hotel Astor in New York. He was going to work as a consultant to determine what improvements or developments were needed in tourism infrastructure in Ireland. So Christenberry brought a team over. They traveled around Ireland in 1950 and early 1951, meeting with the Irish people, visiting some of the existing hotels and restaurants, and evaluating possible sites for tourism. Because De Valera and the Irish government said, what does anyone want to see in Ireland? We don't have a Roman Colosseum. We don't have an Eiffel Tower. What could they possibly be interested in? So Christenberry and his team traveled the country looking for potential tourist attractions. The result of their efforts was a report called The Synthesis of Reports on Tourism 1950-51. It came to be simply known as the Christenberry Report. There were 5 key ingredients and 5 categories that Christenberry identified as needed to be developed in order to have a good tourism infrastructure. First, an official organization solely dedicated to tourism. Second, to designate tourist areas to promote around the country. Third was to expand and modernize tourist accommodations and potentially even build some new hotels to keep up to the standards that Americans were used to improve hotel operations by creating professional management and also by training staff persons on how to provide excellent customer service. And finally, to create publicity and advertising to direct specifically to the American market. Ultimately, the Christenberry Report became a blueprint of how to structure a transatlantic tourism industry. But Lemass also had another American contact that he called on for help. Have you ever heard of this man, Juan Tripp? Yes? Juan Tripp was someone who was very familiar with Ireland. Lemass sought his advice because he was the founder and he was the president of Pan American Airlines. Juan Tripp was a graduate of Yale. He had served in the US Navy during World War I. He was a travel expert and he was a business entrepreneur. But he was also a frequent traveler to Ireland. And you ask, why was that? Because the Pan Am Clipper flying boats had been making refueling stops in Foynes, County Limerick since the 1930s. And here's a picture of them landing in the Foynes estuary. Foynes, by the way, was the forerunner of Shannon Airport, which opened in 1945. When Tripp reviewed the Christenberry report, he talked to Lemass and said, you have an overlooked asset, namely Irish Americans. The Christenberry report had estimated that there were over 20 million Americans of Irish origin at the time. So Tripp said, my team will develop a proposal to determine how to target those potential visitors, building on the recommendations of the Christenberry report. So first and foremost, he recommended capitalizing on the rich association culture of Irish America. Things like the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the Knights of Columbus, the Irish County Societies, the Gaelic sports groups, the GAA groups, the Catholic organizations like the Holy Name Societies, etc. Places where you would find Irish immigrants and Irish Americans. And this would be one of the places he would probably look with us tonight. He also recommended holding exhibits of Irish craftsmanship in US department stores like Gimbel's and Macy's and Filene's. So Aran sweaters became very prominent when they were shown in these different exhibits. He also recommended publicizing Shannon as a duty-free airport where bargains were plentiful, opening castles and estates for guided tours with nominal admission fees, and hosting an annual celebration around St. Patrick's Day called Come Back to Erin. Now I've kind of pulled out the main points of this, but there was a multi-page report proposal that he did for Lemass. And Sean Lemass brought it to the Irish government and they studied all of these different ideas, but one in particular resonated with them. The idea of an annual celebration resonated with De Valera and the members of the Irish government. So they approved this idea for a national festival, but they wanted to concentrate on culture, on Irish heritage, and specifically homecoming for the Irish and their descendants in America. April was chosen instead of March, which might surprise you because March, of course, is St. Patrick's Day. But April was important to De Valera because it was the holy day that the Roman Catholics celebrated, but it was also in recognition of the 1916 Easter Rising, in which De Valera fought. So the festival was scheduled to start in April and run for 3 weeks from April 5th to 26th in 1953. And it was named on Tostal, which was translated from the Irish as a pageant or a display. But they decided to bill it in America as Ireland at Home. That subtle message of come home to Ireland. That was going to focus on this homecoming aspect. According to one member of Dáil Éireann, the Irish Parliament, this was because of, quote, the sentimental attachment of Irish Americans to come back to Ireland. So once this idea for the festival was approved, the work began to make it happen. Remember in the Christenberry report, one of his first recommendations was to develop an organization solely supporting US tourism initiative. And that organization was called Bord Fáilte. Has anybody heard of Bord Fáilte before? But sometimes we just call it the Irish Tourist Board, but its actual official name is Bord Fáilte, which is a translation into English is the Welcome Board. You've heard of Céad Míle Fáilte, right? 100,000 welcomes. Well, this was the Fáilte Board, the Welcome Board or the Welcome Office. The first office was opened in New York at East 50th Street, and then the subsequent offices were opened in Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. You might ask why those cities particularly were chosen. Well, 85% of Irish-born and first-generation Irish Americans lived in those 6 cities. So 85% of the 20 million. From 1952 to 1958, Ontostal dominated the focus of Board Fulch's work. The other thing that the Christenberry Report had recommended was put advertising in place in America. So once Board Fulch was up and running, their work began to start creating advertisements for Ontostal. And ads ran in mainstream newspapers, but also in Irish American newspapers as well. And these were some of the first print marketing advertisements promoting Ireland as a destination, a tourist destination for Irish and Irish Americans. Now, this is the very first Board Fulch ad that was published in the United States. It was in the New York Times in September of 1952. And you can see its title there, An Invitation to Ireland's National Festival. But it's interesting to note that the one attraction in the ad on the lower left-hand side is a church. It's a church named St. Colman's Cathedral. It's not a church that would be known to most Americans or even most Irish Americans, but it would have been known to the majority of immigrants who had left Ireland. Because this is St. Colman's Cathedral. It's set high on a hill overlooking Cove Harbor. It would have been the last image of Ireland that an immigrant would see before leaving Ireland for America. The ad was a subtle message to Irish immigrants in America to come home, evoking nostalgia and homecoming. So from 1952 to 1953, in that span of time when they were promoting the festival, there were many variations of advertising put in place, showing that Board Fulch was having a learning curve, developing what was the right message to send. But it's just interesting to see that this very first message had that cathedral that was so resonant with Irish immigrants. Now, U.S. advertising for Ontostal wasn't just limited to the work of Board Fulch. Transatlantic Airlines also supported the festival through their efforts. KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, Trans World Airlines, and Pan Am all operated weekly flights between New York and Shannon at the time. The National Airline of Ireland, Aer Lingus, I'm sure you've heard of, did not fly across the Atlantic at the time and didn't until 1958, which, by the way, it began its service with 2 planes leased from an American airline. So there was a great dependency in every way, shape, and form with the U.S. KLM, who served Shannon from New York, began highlighting Ontostal in their advertising, as you can see here. And to support the festival, KLM doubled their flight offering from 2 flights a week to 4 flights a week. So that was a big jump in 1953, when air travel really wasn't common among people as it is today. Fly TWA to Ireland for Ontostal. TWA supported. They reportedly spent $50,000 for publicity on the festival that year. And this ad is from November 1952. They also increased their flight service from New York to Shannon from 7 to 12 flights a week. And that was all to support the festival and the aftermath of the festival as well. And of course, the originator of the idea, Pan Am, dedicated half of their publicity in 1952 and early 1953 to promoting the event. They more than doubled their annual number of seats offered from 92,000 to 200,000. And this ad was in the New York Times and the Boston Globe in September of 1952. The actress in the advertisement is Maureen O'Sullivan, famous for her part as Jane, right, in the Tarzan movies, and her family, the Farrow family. If you look closely, there's a young Mia Farrow there on the steps of a Pan Am Clipper airplane. In the ad, she says, quote, "I'm flying to Ireland this year, and I'm taking my 7 children. You'll be missing Ireland's gayest time if you miss on Tostal." Once again, reinforcing the themes of family and homecoming. Portfolio reached out for assistance in graphic design to create posters and marketing material. Once they had begun their own advertising, they knew they needed help in really creating some imaginative marketing collateral. And they enlisted the help of a Dublin-based advertising agency named Sun Advertising. This is the poster for the 1953 inaugural festival. It's beautiful, it's colorful, it's imaginative. We've used it in all the collateral material for this talk just because of how stunningly vibrant it is. The harp that is central to the image is based on the Book of Kells, and it became the festival's iconic symbol, and it became called the Tostal Harp. This poster actually won a graphic design competition in San Diego in 1952 for, quote, "excellence of design among travel posters produced this year." And this helped raise the awareness of Ireland's tourism efforts among those tourism professionals in the United States. 1952 was a busy year for Bord Fáilte. They introduced a bi-monthly full-color magazine specifically marketed to Americans and the US market. Has anybody ever seen Ireland of the Welcomes? Yeah? It's still in existence today. So it was first published in 1952 and still is out there today. It's a high-quality magazine. It features and featured at the time articles written by respected Irish literary figures. It cost 25 cents per issue, and for a full year, $1.50 for an annual subscription. Now, the magazine was available in Bord Fáilte offices, Irish consulates. It was given to travel agencies to share with their customers, was given to tour operators, Irish societies, Irish county societies, Catholic church groups, in as many places as it could be shared to get the word out. And this is the November-December issue that's dedicated to the inaugural festival. And as you can see, the poster prominently displayed on the cover. On Tostal became a national festival, and Bord Fáilte put all of their efforts into making it a success. And their efforts became really paid off, because from 1953 to 1958, it was held annually. Events were organized all around the country, including family gatherings, family reunions, concerts of traditional music and instruments, competitions in Irish step dancing and singing, championships in Gaelic sports, hurling and Irish football, golf and fishing. There were fashion shows with Irish linen and Irish materials, and even a hairstyling competition. And somehow the winner had her hair teased up into the Tostal harp. So that would have been fun. The festival ended in 1958 because by then transatlantic tourism had really gotten a strong foundation in the country. And a few things happened in 1963 to kind of take it to the, in the 1960s to take it to the next level. Of course, in 1961, John F. Kennedy was sworn in as the first Irish-American Catholic U.S. president. His paternal and maternal roots were in counties Cavan, Cork, Limerick, and Wexford. And in June of 1963, Kennedy became the first American president to travel to Ireland while in office. His visit to the home of his Fitzgerald relatives in Wexford was greeted with pride and exhilaration. Kennedy's sojourn was the quintessential Irish-American homecoming of the 20th century. His trip heightened Ireland's profile on the world stage. It made Irish Americans proud of their heritage, and it stimulated a boom in tourism from the United States, and this time not just with Irish Americans. At the end of the 1960s, the number of American visitors reached over 250,000. That was compared to just under 30,000 in 1953. So in a decade, it was just a quantum leap. A year after his historic visit, Ireland participated in the 1964 New York World's Fair. Ireland was the only pavilion that represented a country to receive total financial support from their government. And this is a picture of the Ireland Pavilion. It was a mix of ancient and modern styles. You can see the round tower in the center, recalling Ireland's long history. It was also a collaboration between an Irish architect, Andrew Devane, and an American architect, George Nelson. In the pavilion, there were displays of Irish culture, crafts, history, and industry. There was a cafe where, of course, Irish coffee was served, where Irish coffee had been invented in Foynes Airport to warm those customers up who had been arriving in the early morning. There was a theater for performances of Irish music and dance. The pavilion was an excellent advertising promotion for tourism to Ireland. The impact of An Tósta was felt around the country, and places around Ireland wanted to start their own local tourism initiatives, realizing tourism was good for bringing money into the community's economy. And to do so, they reached out to their counterparts in America, specifically Irish county organizations and Gaelic sports organizations, as well as Catholic associations and even universities that had Catholic connections as well. Some of the regional festivals that were an outgrowth of the national festival were Wexford's Opera Festival in 1953, Cork's Choral Festival and Galway's Oyster Festival in 1954, Dublin's Theatre Festival in 1957, Sligo's Yeats Festival in 1958, and Kerry's Rose of Tralee Festival in 1959. Has anybody heard of any of these festivals? A couple, the Rose of Tralee? And all of these festivals are still in existence. Last year, the Rose of Tralee had the largest number of young ladies who were descendant from Irish, including one from China. So they've really grown their base from the early days of 5 young American women participating in the Rose of Tralee Festival. And of course, there's a ripple effect of Ireland's transatlantic tourism. Investment in the transatlantic tourism proved to be a worthy endeavor for Ireland, despite the early resistance of members of the Irish government, and also with the help of American travel experts. And the ripple of that foundation, laid in the 1950s, continues to this day, as does Ireland's connection with Irish Americans, developing local partnerships. In 1999, you in Newport did something very similar to all of those other festivals. You created a sister city program between Newport and Kinsale, Ireland. And these two cities, twin cities, sister cities, has been going strong. Let's talk a little bit about it. The program was the brainchild of the Honorable Paul Crowley. Does people remember Paul? Yeah, he was, a little applause in the back, yes, he was a visionary. Rhode Island State Representative, he was the director of Newport Convention and Visitors Bureau, the co-owner of La Forge Restaurant, and he had an idea to grow Newport's tourism internationally. He talked about his idea with Rhode Island's U.S. Senator Patrick Kennedy, and Patrick Kennedy talked about the idea to his aunt Jean Kennedy Smith, who happened to be U.S. Ambassador to Ireland at the time. So she was a handy person to have in the family. And from those discussions, the concept about Newport-Kinsale Sister City program came to life. Crowley received enthusiastic support from local officials here on moving forward. And why Kinsale? Well, the early settlers of Newport in the area were from Cork and the surrounding counties. The men were the blacksmiths and the stonemasons that helped build the mansions. The Irish immigrant women were domestics in the mansions as well. Plus, the two cities have similarities. Both are historic ports. They have forts and ports. They're fishing towns, sailing hubs. They both have a rich military heritage. They're known for their renowned restaurants and a bustling seasonal tourism economy. So now I ask the question, how many of you have ever visited Kinsale? Wow, we're at like 80, 90%. That's good news. The program's working. Well, if you haven't visited Kinsale, here's a few pictures to whet your appetite. Kinsale is a charming, picturesque village in the southwest of Ireland. It looks something right out of a fairy tale. It has a touch of the Disney mystique. The buildings are colorful and charming. The people are warm and welcoming. And I've heard especially warm and welcoming if you're from Newport or the general area. They roll out the red carpet. On October 3rd of 1999, the two cities signed a proclamation. This is just a little excerpt of it to show you. It was for the twinning, which is the Irish equivalent of Sister City, the twinning of Kinsale and Newport. The hope was that the program would, quote, result in a bond of friendship between the individual citizens of both communities. It's still going strong. And next year will be the 25th anniversary of the program, much to the credit of the people who put it together. The individuals who signed the contract was Dermot Collins, the mayor of Kinsale, John Toomey, the chairman of the Kinsale Twinning Program, who, by the way, is still the chairman of the Twinning Program, the mayor of Newport at the time, David Gordon, and of course, the chairman of Newport Twinning Committee, Paul Crowley. And Paul Crowley, in that picture I showed you, was actually holding the proclamation, so you can see how big it is. The current chairman of Newport Committee is Rick O'Neill, who has been involved since the beginning. And Rick continues to grow the program and forge new relationships for Newport. And I'd like to acknowledge Rick for his generosity in sharing his knowledge and his information with me. So thank you, Rick. I see you in the back there. There have been numerous benefits and many exchanges between the two cities. There have been sailing regattas, golf tournaments, rugby matches, student exchanges between Rogers High School, Thompson Middle School, and Salve Regina University. One of the students who was on exchange program at Salve Regina actually wrote her senior thesis on the Sister City program. Students from Kinsale come to Newport during the summer on J-1 visas, and I've been told on one summer you had up to 500 Irish students over here. There is the Chef Exchange Program and delegations for St. Patrick's Day. And I'd like to just say a word about those last two programs. On the Newport-Kinsale Chef Program, it's a culinary program that's an exchange to experience and learn about each other's culture. And these are two brochures generously shared with me by Catherine Farrington of Discover Newport. So you can just see some of the ways it was promoted. On the left, it's promoting an authentic, quote, New England lobster bake in Kinsale. And on the right, Kinsale's Festival of Fine Food in Newport. Also, when in Newport, the Irish chefs have visited Johnson & Wales, worked with their students, but also enhanced their own skills as well. The chef program was envisioned by Paul Crowley. It was launched in 2000 when Kinsale chefs were invited to Newport. And in March of 2001, the cities both hosted programs around the same time with visiting chefs in each city preparing food. The program continues today. The lead person is Paul Shea. I think I saw Paul. There's Paul, and he continues to do a great job growing the program. So thank you, Paul, for all the information you shared with me as well. Now, there are 11 restaurants in Kinsale's Good Food Circle that participate. Some of Newport's restaurants are the Fastnet, Smuggler's, Malt, Tavern on Broadway, and La Forge, where it all began with Paul Crowley. In March of 2024, Kinsale chefs will again be returning in Newport, and I know Paul will be leading them in all kinds of activities for a celebration. So I'd like to thank Catherine Farrington and Paul Shea for sharing all their information with me. And I share some of the pictures of the chefs, the foods that they put together. And as you can see from the picture, it takes a lot of people to put programs like this together, a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work. Now, of course, probably the most important day on the Irish calendar, I think you'll agree, is St. Patrick's Day, right? And delegations have been visiting each other's cities since the start of the program. But something special happened in 2014. Newport was given a singular honor. Kinsale chose their first Irish American in their history to be St. Patrick's Day Grand Marshal, Rick O'Neill. And you can give him an applause, absolutely. And that magic repeated itself in 2020 when Paul Shea was chosen to be Grand Marshal. And he was chosen in 2020, and he could finally fulfill that role in 2023 because of the you-know-what. And he says he's the longest-serving Grand Marshal in Kinsale history. So congratulations to both Rick and Paul for that singular honor of an Irish American being a Grand Marshal in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. There's a guest book at a local pub in Kinsale, the White House. I've been told it's the unofficial headquarters of the twinning program. It contains the names of hundreds of visitors from Newport and Rhode Island, and many of the entries say, "It feels just like home," or "I feel like I'm among family." It's nice to know that homecoming theme of On Toastal in 1953 resonates 7 decades later, thanks to the work of so many dedicated Irish-American Newporters, the work of Catherine Farrington, Rick O'Neill, Paul Shea, Paul Crowley, so many in the pictures that I showed you, and I congratulate you on that great work. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
I just have a comment that my husband and I were at the White House in Kinsale, and they recently renamed their pub the Fifth Ward.
That's right, yes. Yes.
Okay, I got something to say about
Sure.
The White House Pub in Kinsale. We went there the first year of the parade. Our brother Mike McKenna, retired chief Newport Police, he's #1 in the book.
Oh, very good.
We're 2, 3, and 4.
And you're 2, 3, and 4?
Actually, we were there. We arrived in Kinsale a week to 10 days before the actual signing. So they put together, we're like, oh, we got to start this register and sign. So we signed, and they cut it out and taped it in. So, technically, it was October 3rd.
Because I was going to say, maybe that was your comment that I was reading.
No, so there was a big soccer tournament had gone on, so they had a big party at the White House, and Michael Ferrali, he was like, it was myself, my 2 brothers, and my dad, and we had been on a 2-week tour of the country, and he was like, you guys are staying the night, because we're going to be doing a big thing with Newport in about 10 days, and so he put us up at the White House, and it was a heck of a celebration all night long, and it is nice back there. There's no doubt about that. It's a beautiful place, a lot like Newport. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I mean, that brings it to life, that your own personal experience. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'd like to just shed a little bit of light on John Kennedy's trip to Ireland. When he went in 1963, that was his 4th trip to Ireland. In 1946, he went as a congressman. And when he was president, he said to P.S. Salinger, I want to go to Ireland. And they kind of ignored him. And then he said the next day, I want to go to Ireland. And he said, you don't need any Irish votes, you don't need any Irishmen. He said, I am the president, and I want to go to Ireland. And I think he made 2 comments when he was in Ireland, which really boosted things up. He got up and he said, I don't know how Jackie liked this, but he said the 3.5 days were the happiest days of his life. And when he left Ireland, we all know he didn't get back. He said he'd come in the springtime. He said, Ireland is not the land of my birth, but is the land for which I hold the most affection.
Thank you.
I
Beautiful.
think he really boosted us up.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Can you speak about bed and breakfast's development through Ireland? It's beautiful when you use that.
Yes, and I'll just repeat that for the people on Zoom. The question is, can I comment on the bed and breakfast throughout Ireland? And they're beautiful and very welcoming. Yes, as a matter of fact, I can. The bed and breakfast actually was developed because of the Rose of Tralee competition in County Kerry. The Kerry organizations in New York and Boston chartered trips over and brought so many people that there wasn't room at the hotel. So people in the area said, they can stay at our house. We'll welcome in it. And the Irish Tourist Board said, well, this is a terrific idea. Why don't we start having people around the country, have certain standards of what they need to fulfill, and we'll register them. And in the old days, when they had the bed and breakfast, you used to see the Shamrock, the Bord Fáilte Shamrock, over any approved bed and breakfast place. So indirectly, I think we could say it was an outgrowth of the Soul on Toastal Festival because it was specifically related to the County Kerry Rose of Tralee, where there just simply weren't enough hotels to accommodate all the people that came by. And the Irish, being the gracious people they were, said, they can stay at our house. And everybody enjoyed that experience so much of being sort of in the home and meeting Irish people one-on-one, having breakfast, sitting down, and feeling welcome as a part of family, that it actually became sort of an industry around the country. And people welcomed that opportunity as well to host people in their home. And it was great for the local economy as well. And there were people in Bord Fáilte whose job it was, a tough one, I would have liked it, to go around, eat in the restaurants, and then stay in the bed and breakfast and rate them to make sure that they were going to stay up to the 5-star standard. So a great question, and also an interesting background of it came to be sort of serendipitously. It wasn't a plan like, well, let's do this. It was like, hey, that happened, and maybe we should learn something from it. Let's make it an industry. Thank you. Yes?
In the White House restaurant, there was a large memorial to the New York City Fire Department the particular house where all the firemen died during the collapse of the 2 buildings.
In 9/11.
Right, yeah, 9/11. I think there's also a memorial outside the city,
Yeah, and Deanna is just saying, yes, it's called the Garden of Remembrance.
Right.
Yes, so that's a very nice, so it continues, there's so much more. I mean, to the dimensions of the program is not just the chef program or the delegations, but the acknowledgement of the loss and feeling that sympathy with us as well. So thank you for sharing that as well. Anyone else?
My grandmother, Margaret Clancy, was one of 6 sisters who came over one by one. They got jobs, they saved their money and sent it back to the next sister, 6 of them. My grandmother always told us she had sailed from Queenstown, even though her birthplace was in County Clare. Now, the picture you showed of the cathedral and the landscape of people before they got on the boat or the ship in Cork, isn't that the same place as Queenstown?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. So thank you for bringing that up. They immigrated when Ireland was a colony of Great Britain. Ireland was a colony of Great Britain up until the creation of the Irish Free State in 1922. So place names in Ireland would have names, British names. And Queenstown, being named after the Queen of England, as soon as Ireland became a free state, they changed it back to its Irish name of Cove. And so you have that around. My family are from a county called County Laois, which in the British colony times was called Queen's County. County Offaly was called King's County. So those names all changed to become more the Irish names, the original Irish names of the places, or names that were Irish names. So yes, Queenstown is exactly the same place. And if you looked at the papers of your ancestors, you would also see that their citizenship was British. It would not have been Irish because they were British citizens at the time. So yeah, so some nuances when you do research and you do genealogy and you go, but they weren't British, they're Irish. But they were technically under, the rule of Great Britain up until the 1922 creation of the Irish Free State, and then they separated. So that's a great question. Thank you for that. And the other thing about, just one note too, because it kind of fits in with this in terms of the Board Fáilte, the name of the Irish Tourist Board now is Tourism Ireland. And that came out of the 1998 Peace Accord because it combined the work of the Northern Ireland Tourist Board and Board Fáilte into one body that now markets the island of Ireland. So it doesn't just market the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, which are separate, and Northern Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom. But Tourism Ireland, sort of the descendant, if you will, of Board Fáilte, now their charge is to promote the island of Ireland. So when you see advertisements, they're Tourism Ireland, it's just a new sort of dimension of Board Fáilte, but looking at Northern Ireland as sort of a part of the whole. And that was part of the Peace Accord in 1998. Anybody else? Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, Rick. I think Rick has something to say.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. As was mentioned, next year is the 25th anniversary of the twinning. So there's going to be a special get-together in Kinsale, because that's where it started. It's going to be on the weekend of the 11th to the 14th of April. So we're waiting to hear from our friends in Kinsale what they have planned for us. We don't know yet what's going to take place, but the Willows have been there many times. You know that you're never disappointed when you get there. And once you get there, you make a friendship for a lifetime. So keep an eye in the local media for some information that we'll be putting out once we obtain some information. But if you haven't gone, I think you should put this on your to-do list for next year and make sure that you go and visit Kinsale. It's a great place. And as we mentioned, Paul Crowley, we owe a big deal of thanks to Paul Crowley because this was his vision that started this. And we've all benefited from it. We go from strength to strength, as they call it over there. But it's a great town, and we love going there. Yes.
I know a lot of you have gone to Kinsale in the past, but about those of us who haven't been, is this any kind of an organized group?
Everyone's welcome. Well, different people travel at different times because they go different places. Like I said, the main events will take place between the 11th and the 14th of April next year. And then in 2025, there'll be something taking place in Newport. Those dates haven't been determined yet. But that's kind of how the program has started. 99, it started in Kinsale, and then when they came over in 2000, we did a similar kind of welcome them, and it's gone from there. But
And there'll be more decided over the next few weeks,
Absolutely.
so what months, yeah.
thank you.
Detail. Oh. I just think this talk was brilliant. I mean, it was really brilliant. It was just a whole different aspect that we didn't know. And I have to apologize. I see our sponsors wrapped up in a blanket because it's so damn cold in here. And I do apologize. We did try to turn the heat up, but I guess it didn't work. But please stay and socialize. I hope, I think there's still some cheese and crackers and some fruit in the back. And thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Maureen, for just a brilliant, brilliant presentation.